fellow DMs, when I ran Curse of Strahd and Death House, I ran most of the upstairs, or pretty much all the upstairs, as Theater of the Mind. And then when they went to the underside of the house, the dungeon, I ran that pretty much as a dungeon crawl and used a lot of my terrain and tilescapes and that kind of thing. So I thought it'd be fun to show you those tilescape setups. Now what you're going to see are my interpretations of the map. I thought it was a lot of pretty big and meandering, and really you didn't really need all those empty rooms and that kind of thing. So I condensed it a bit for my group, but I thought it'd be fun to show you guys my setup so you can see how I set up for the dungeon in the Death House. Now when they first came down the stairs to the dungeon, they come out and of course, all this stuff is not set up on the table right as they come out, right when they come out of the door there. I don't set everything up immediately like I had all the doors set up and everything, but the little rooms and everything I put on after they decided to go in that particular room. But what I like to do is like set up the little rooms separately, and then with the caskets and everything, when they come in, just put it on the table, right? So very easy. But when they come in, they start checking the different rooms, decide where they're going to go, and they check the caskets. And there's of course Rose and Thorn's casket, their little caskets. And then I had one of the caskets was broken, and there was like a ghoul in there, so I thought that was a kind of a fun encounter. Then we moved on to the cult area. This was pretty extensive in the module itself, but I made it smaller. I mean, you don't really need all that empty space, right? It's just kind of boring stuff. So I thought, a couple rooms with a couple beds, that's really kind of all we needed. And then I had the stairs, the secret passage going up there. And like I said, of course, all this isn't necessarily put down at, immediately when they come in. They come in the door, they see the well and the archway going to the other hallway and through the other hallway, right? The rooms I just set down with the terrain on them when they went into the rooms. Now the well became important later on, and I'll explain why when they have the encounter. So as they move on, they encounter, the whole thing with them, that was cool with the house was it was kind of this cannibal thing, right? The parents were these depraved cannibals, and Death House hungers for life from that, right? So I had a room where they had stashed all the skeletons from the feasts they had, which was pretty grisly. And they were attacked by, I had them attacked by some skeletons that were being controlled by the former inhabitants, the Durst parents. And I had them turn into kind of like bloated ghoul-like things. And they were controlling the skeletons to try to drag them into the dinner hall to feast on them. But they got past that, and they got in the dinner hall, and I had the Durst behind these curtains, as you can see on the tile, and I had the hall all set up and everything, and so they couldn't immediately see them. And they come in, and the Dursts, I had them slow because they're kind of bloated, and they're saying they're so hungry, and all that. Their curse is to be like eternally hungry, right? And so they're starving, and they're dragging their bulks, after the players. And I had this thing where they could like vomit, on the players, which was really gross. Spit this, acidic bile and vomit on them. And when they killed them, they kind of explode in this bile, which was just disgusting. So that's where the well came in. After they had this encounter, that's where the well came in. Now, this was the big encounter of the dungeon. Now, in the module, it's kind of like this, I think it's the Logroth, something like that, this creature that's in the final room. But if you do this, if you play your cards right, you won't have to fight that thing. So I wanted to have a nice set piece encounter that was creepy and thematic for the house, but it wasn't as easy for them to avoid as the whole Logroth thing. If they sacrifice to the house, they don't have to. I didn't have Logroth summoned if they sacrifice to the house. So as they move on, they discover a couple more rooms. One is like an old storage room, okay, and in the module they had the Grick, which I didn't think was very thematic, but I put a bunch of rats in there, and they didn't really tangle with them, but they figured out that they could, when they have to sacrifice life to the house, they could sacrifice some rats, and that's what they did. Then I had another room where it had a statue of Strahd, which is tying Strahd into this. You know, they had found the letter from Strahd upper in the upper level of the house. I kind of tied Strahd into it. They didn't mess with the uh, the black orb that he's holding, so they didn't have that problem. They thought maybe they had to sacrifice rats to Strahd because they found these chairs that had spikes in them, and people would sit, and they'd bleed people dry or whatever in these chairs, and so they thought maybe they had to do that with the rats, and that really wasn't the case. It was just a torture room that they had. So, but they did figure out that they had to take the rats down and sacrifice them to the house. They had to sacrifice a life to get out of the house. So now let's go to the final level, and I change it up quite a bit from what's in the module. So I wanted the room to be pretty interesting if they fought the creature at the end. And kind of the strategy is for this thing, you want to kind of drag it, kind of kite the thing, right? So I gave them lots of places they could go, get around and perch on and stuff, and the monster would have to kind of chase them around. So, but like I said, my group ended up kind of circumventing that because they sacrificed the rat, so we didn't have that. But the room I thought was really cool. I did, the cellophane kind of for the water to make it look. I painted the board underneath, and then did the cellophane for the water to make it kind of look like water. And I had these blocks for the elevated parts of the room out of the water. So pretty neat. But like I say, they figured it out. So kudos to them. And I hope you guys like this little tour of the Death House basement that I modified with my Tilescapes. And see you guys next time. Hey friends, I thought you might like to see Lorgoth the Decayer, which is the final boss monster if the players don't sacrifice to the house, which mine did, so I never pulled it out. But here's the mini if you want to see what I was going to use. It's actually a Shambling Mound mini that I printed off the internet and printed on my 3D printer. And there you go. I added a little detail to it with some modeling paste, and there's my Decayer, but he never came out, so I'll have to use him for something else.